Howdy guys, welcome back to BIG Photography. This is Ben, and today we're going to be talking all about white balance and how we can get the best white balance out of our photos. Now, in an ideal situation, you would have at least shot a gray card or white balanced your camera to a gray card during your shoot. Here you can see I'm using the Color Checker Passport video. That's because sometimes I do video work and I like that this is compact and easy to bring with me, but basically any gray card will work. And so usually after I've got my lights set up and I'm just about to start shooting, I'll usually have the model hold up a gray card, or I'll just hold it in front of the lens, or sometimes I'll just put it on a stand like here. That way, when it comes to the raw processing step, I can just come over here, select my white balance tool, click on the little gray patch, and then my image is properly white balanced and I am good to go. But what I want to talk about today is what do you do if you didn't shoot a gray card and you're only working with a JPEG image and your white balance is incorrect or just slightly off. I'm going to show you a few tools and techniques that we can use to try to get the best white balance we can out of our image without having a proper gray card. Okay, so let's just jump into our first image. Now, you might recognize this picture from my last video I did about skin tone. Now, this is the correctly white balanced image from the raw file. But let's say, for example, that we are presented with the image like this. We're presented with this JPEG. This is the only JPEG we have. We don't have the raw file, and the white balance is just incorrect. So how can we fix that? Now, obviously, Affinity Photo has a white balance adjustment tool in it, so we can click on that and it brings up our white balance. And ideally, we should be able to select a picker, pick somewhere in the image that should be white, like this white wall, and it should white balance it. Now, unfortunately, it doesn't really work like that. And without getting into too much detail, basically, a JPEG does not have the color information or flexibility to correctly get a white balance the way a raw file does. Where in a raw file, like say something like this, if your white balance was really just off and incorrect, you can come in here and select your white balance tool, click on something that should be white, and it's good to go. But unfortunately with the JPEG, we don't have that kind of flexibility. And as you can see here with the white balance tool, it didn't really do much. Now I can tell that this is not actually white just by looking at it, but I can also confirm it via the scopes. So here I'm looking at the RGB parade. Now, if you don't have these scopes up, you can go to Window and go to Scope and make sure that scope is checked. And then you can bring down this pull down menu to where it says RGB parade. And this tells you how much red, blue, and green are present in your image, as well as giving you kind of a graphic representation of your image. So if I wanted to just assess only the white, I can go to my crop tool. I'm gonna go ahead and hit C on my keyboard to bring up the crop tool. And I'm going to just crop in to this little area here, hit enter. And if this image was truly white, then there would be an equal amount of red, green, and blue in the image, but there isn't. So we're gonna have to do it manually. So I'm gonna go ahead and grab these sliders and let's go ahead and go the wrong way. Let's go ahead and add some more blue here. And then maybe take out some green by adding magenta. And let's just try to get this pretty even. Okay, something like that looks pretty good. That's gonna be close enough, I think. Okay, there, let's just do that. All right, so now I can look and see there's pretty much an equal amount of red, green, and blue in this image. Now, if I want to bring that image back, I can go to Document and Unclip Canvas, and that brings back the image before the clip or the cropping. And if we turn this off and on, we can definitely see there's quite a big difference, but it's still not perfect. Again, the JPEG just does not have the flexibility to really accurately do a white balance once it's kind of been messed up. But with some extra tools, we can get really, really close. So if you watched my last video on skin tones, you'll know, or you should be familiar with, the vector scope. This helps us assess the colors that are present in our image. And by using this, and using this eye line, or sometimes the skin tone line, we can dial in the skin tone to look a bit more natural. So we're going to do that with a HSL adjustment layer. And what I want to do is I want to narrow in just on her skin. I'm going to pick her, and I'll grab this area, the shoulder here, and I'm going to desaturate everything just so I can actually see what my adjustment is affecting. So it's just affecting her skin, not her shirt, not her lips. Okay, we'll do something like that. Let's bring this back by double clicking on it. Now I can see that her skin is a little bit toward the yellow side, so I want to shift it up toward magenta. I'm going to take this hue shift slider and shift it to the right a little bit. Something like that. Now, as we shift to the right, we gain saturation, so we're going to have to desaturate to compensate for that, and that looks pretty good. Now, if we were to compare it to the original correctly white balance image, it looks close. It's not perfect, but it looks close. So I wanted to get it more perfect. Looks like I gotta brighten it up a little bit. Let's go here. Let's bring our luminosity up a bit higher. Now, as we raise our luminosity, it tends to desaturate the image. So we're gonna actually bring our saturation back, something like so. So now if we compare, that's pretty close. Like, not bad from going from here to here. Now, this even works if you have an extremely incorrect white balance, something like this. Now, I'm sure we've all had this happen where, you know, we had our camera set to the wrong white balance. We're in a rush. We were only shooting JPEG, and we get home and we realize that some of our images or all of our images look like this. Now, all is not lost, but it's going to take a lot more work to get a proper white balance from this JPEG. If we were shooting in RAW, this would be a non-issue. You would click on that white wall, boom, everything would be good to go. But here we don't have that flexibility. And as we've seen with the white balance adjustment tool already, by clicking this picker and choosing this white wall, it kind of helps. It does make an attempt, but it's still not perfect. So we're gonna have to do it manually. Now this time, we're gonna do it manually without the white balance tool. We're gonna do it with curves. Okay, so with our curves up, we're going to be using our RGB parade to assess our black point and our white point. Not all the time, but a lot of times you want the darkest parts of your image to be pure black and the lightest parts to be kind of pure white. Now, looking at this RGB parade, looking at this scope here, the bottom parts down here are showing our darker values and the top part is showing our lighter values. So I can definitely see that this kind of upside down U shape, that's the shape of this white kind of around her head. Now this should be white. So if it should be white, these values should all be lined up. So we're gonna try to do that with our curves. So let's go ahead and start with the blue channel, because the blue channel is the one that's the most out of place. Now, unfortunately, the blue channel has been clipped, so we don't have a lot of information there. And you can see that by as I start dragging this blue channel down, we don't have that nice upside down U shape. We have this kind of flat line. But we're gonna work with what we got. Let's go ahead and go to the red channel, and let's bring that red up in the highlights. Okay, we're looking pretty good. Maybe something about like that. All right, that's going to be good enough for now. Now let's look at the darks. There is a bit too much red, so we're going to bring some of this red, or sorry, we're going to add some red to bring the red up. And we can see blue, that there is a bit too much blue because it's higher up on the scope. So let's go ahead and bring the blue down, take some blue out, just to try to get that even. Okay, so we've got our blacks in a sense, or our darker shades kind of evened out where they're pretty roughly black. That's going to be like the area in her hair. And then we have the white wall looking pretty white. Now, obviously we can see the skin is not correct. So now we're going to have to basically just get creative, and we're going to have to basically use our memory to know what her skin looks like. Now, human beings have things called memory colors, where most humans know what skin looks like. We know what green grass looks like. We know what the sky looks like. And so we're just going to have to use our eye to try to best assess how to get this image looking natural. So right off the bat, we can still see there's quite a lot of blue in her skin. So with the blue channel selected, I'm going to just grab an area somewhere down here in the middle, which I guess is the midtones where her skin is probably, and I'm going to just really take out blue to add more yellow in. Let's go a bit extreme because it's going to help us really assess what we're doing. Now, as I do that, we can really see now there's almost too much green in her skin. So let's go ahead and go to the green channel, and let's drag this green down till we start getting it to a little bit more magenta and more skin tone look. Now, already right off the bat, that's looking pretty good. We can see that looking at the RGB parade, the greens are a little low in the highlights. Let's go ahead and grab the top part here and just add some more greens in the highlights. Something like that. And as we've done that, we've seen the red has now getting a little bit too much red in the shadows. So let's go back to our red channel and maybe bring it down a little bit. So this is going to be a lot of back and forth, back and forth. And as we've done this, because we've reduced so much of the blue and green channel, we've obviously lost some of our luminosity. So let's go to our master channel and then just raise up the brightness here. Maybe actually bring up the blacks a little bit like that. Okay. And then as far as the red channel goes, I think that looks okay. We can add some more red into the midtones to her skin maybe, and maybe something like that. So right off the bat, this is our before and that was our after. Now if we compare this to the actually correct image, yes, it looks very different. This is the really correctly white balance raw. This is our adjusted one, and I can see, you know, okay, there's still some blue in the skin. I could make that better by actually just dragging this slider down even more. Let's make a new point and just grab this, slide it down even more, get more yellow in there, and then maybe gonna have to pull down the green as well to get more magenta. But I think that's not too bad considering we came from this. Now, this is a lot of work to do on multiple images, but if you're working with just one image, you definitely have some flexibility with using the curves. And then if we wanted to get even more accurate or more adjustments, we could open up a HSL adjustment layer to basically just try to affect her skin. Here I have the red patch selected. That's pretty much her skin tone right there. And then if I wanted, I could go over to the vector scope and I can see that her skin is a bit on the red side. And I'm going to just hue shift that red down a little bit more toward yellow. Something like that. That's the before and that's the after. And then maybe up the saturation a tad, and maybe up the lightness too, which is going to kind of naturally desaturate it. So now we've got something like that. And I think that looks okay, considering we basically went from here to something that now looks like human skin tone. So these are great ways to assess your image. Now, this is kind of helpful because we had something totally white in the image. So like I said, when we go to our RGB parade, we can use this white wall as a great way to assess our image. But what if we had something like this, where we have nothing in our image that is white or gray or anything that we can base a white balance off of? So this is a case where you're just going to have to do it all by eye. And I still think that using the curves is the best way to do that, because you have so much flexibility and so much control. So I'm going to go ahead and do a really quick one here. I'm going to explain what I'm doing. I can see there's way too much red in this image. So let's just go ahead and take out some of that red. There's a lot of yellow as well. So we're going to counter that by adding blue. And just those two adjustments right there, you can already see make a pretty big difference. Green, let's see, I think there's a little bit of green in it. Let's go ahead and drag the green down to add some magenta into her skin. And then because we did a lot of this reduction, we're going to probably raise up our luminosity a bit like that. Okay, so just like that, I was able to make some pretty drastic adjustments just with the curves tool. Now, if I were to compare this to the corrected image, this is the actual image. So this is the one that is correctly white balance from the raw file. And this is the one that I just created. Not too bad. Now, of course, in real life, if this was the only JPEG you had, you wouldn't have a reference accurate image to reference off of. But what we're trying to do is basically using our eye plus using things like the RGB parade and the vector scope to really help assess our skin tone. If we wanted to narrow her skin tone down some more, we could do what we did before, HSL adjustment layer. Now this time I want to crop in and just crop into an area of her skin. Let's go ahead and do her forehead here. And I can see that it's a bit too red. I want to try to push this down a little bit more toward this eye line. Now, if what I'm saying is not making any sense, please go back and watch my video about skin tones, because I really explained what the vector scope is and how you read it and how to use it. So I want to shift this a bit more toward that yellow. Yeah, something like that. That looks good. Let's go back, document, unclip canvas, and then you can see our before and our after. And then it kind of, we lost some saturation when we did that. So let's go ahead and bump up our saturation. Okay, so if I was looking at this image just as it is, I would say this looks okay. There's still a lot of tweaking I could do, but we went from this to this, and comparing it to the actually corrected white balance, it's different, definitely, but it's close enough to start doing more creative work from. I guess the moral of the story is get your white balance correct at the raw processing step. Please try to shoot a gray card or something to reference, because I've had people say, you know, I don't even shoot a gray card or worry about white balance because I'm shooting raw, which is fine, because when you shoot raw, you have that flexibility. But if, for example, this is your raw image, you still have to manually adjust the white balance because you don't have anything to white balance to. So that's why I think it's really important to always have a gray card at the beginning of your shoot, maybe at the end as well, just so that you have something to reference. Because even though we can control our white balance perfectly at the raw step, unless we have something to actually gauge it against, we still are just making educated guesses. So, you know, if you're good with color and you've developed a good eye, you can do this. But yeah, that's all I wanted to say for this video. Probably a lot longer than I wanted it to be, but I hope it was helpful. Hope I give you some ideas to help work out some white balance issues you may have in your pictures or images. And I hope I could give you some cool tips. And if you've got any tips that you've learned along your way, please feel free to share them. Please comment. Right now I still reply to every comment. I love hearing your guys' thoughts, opinions, feedback. So anyways, that is going to be all for this video, guys. Thank you very much, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.